A quorum. The committee is in public session. So apologies have been received from Deputy Troy and an Teachta Cuiv Tajianama in Orch and Teachta Troy, and I understand the Deputy Keith may not be here either. I spoke to him yesterday evening. Before we begin, can I remind members to please switch off their mobile phones as it can affect the equipment. And secondly, if there is any business members would like to raise in private session, right, I would like to raise one item in private session, if that's agreed, if we go into private. Yes, bringing in the witnesses.
Okay, there you
go. The minutes of the 12th and 19th of December 2018 have been circulated. Are they agreed? Agreed. Before we commence the main business, I wish to turn to correspondence 219-373, letter from the Journal Office regarding the noise regulation bill, which we're dealing with later on. It's the subject of a meeting after this meeting. Correspondence 2018-37A, B and BA. Letter from the Clerk to the Joint Committee of European Affairs. It is supposed to note this item of correspondence. That agreed? Agreed. Correspondence 2019-375. Email from Kevin Doyle, Department of Tourism. It is supposed to apply to Mr Doyle, requesting that the Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport liaise with the bodies in advance of the Minister appearing before the committee for the periodic review of the implementation status of the recommendations to the committee's report, accessibility of public transport of people with disabilities. Is that agreed? Agreed. Correspondence 2019-376, email from Deputy Ruth Coppinger. These items have been included in our work programme for 2019. Correspondence 2019-377, email from the Office of Minister Shane Ross. I understand the Minister is keen to approve this appointment as soon as possible, and it is therefore proposed, with your consent, that it be scheduled for the 30th of January. That's the chairperson of the Marine Casualty Investigation Board designate that we'd bring them in. Is that agreed? Agreed. Correspondence 2019-378, email from the Football Association of Ireland. Apologise for not being available, but available to come in on the 20th of February. Is that agreed and rescheduled on that date? Agreed and rescheduled. Sorry, the time on that date. We'll get that for you, Senator. 1:30 p.m.
And at 1:30 on the 30th as well.
That's the one we're dealing with there now. Sorry, pardon. 9:30 on the 30th.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, correspondence from Senator Podigo, Katie, an item to be added to our annual work programme. That's agreed. Agreed. Correspondence 2019-380, email from the Clerk of the Channel attaching 10th report of the Committee of Selection, post to note. Agreed. Agreed. Correspondence 2019-381, email from Darren Clark, Private Secretary Minister of State Brendan Griffin, acknowledging receipt of an email regarding a meeting. It is supposed to note this item of correspondence. Agreed. Agreed. Correspondence 2019-382, email from Chris Smith, Minister's Office, proposed to note this item of correspondence as this is the subject of today's meeting. Agreed. 2019-383, email from Chris Smith, just scheduling the presence of Minister Shane Ross to discuss Brexit and other issues on the 6th of February. Is that agreed? Agreed. 2019-384, email from the Office of the Secretary General, Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport, confirming that the Secretary General will appear today. That's happening. Correspondence 2019-385, letter from Miles O'Reilly, General Secretary, Taxi Dispatch Operators Representative Association, propose to consider this item in a work programme. Agreed. Correspondence 2019-386A, B. Sorry.
We're going to consider it in the context of a work programme. We have a work programme up to when?
The work programme was agreed before Christmas. Yeah.
It's up to.
It's added into that.
But it's that's only for consideration, as opposed.
Yes, of course.
To, yes,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
No, so we go through the items we agreed. Obviously, the FEI is one of those, and then after that, then we can look at it again. So anybody who requests any item, excuse me, we put that for consideration. Correspondence. Apologise for being hoarse. 2019-386A, B. Email from Ray Walsh, Corporate Affairs. It is Corporate Affairs. So where am I gone here? And Licensing Director, FAI. Correspondence, and it's proposed to note this item, and it will be scheduled for a meeting on the 20th of February. Is that agreed? Agreed. 2019-387A and B. That's an email advising me of a a conference this morning in the French Embassy about transport. I propose to note that item. Correspondence 2019-388, email from Mr. Chris Smith, Private Secretary, Minister Shane Ross, proposed to note this item and it will be discussed on the 6th of February. Is that agreed? Agreed. 2019-389, email from Anne Graham, CEO NTA, proposed to arrange a briefing for members who are available. That's on the next phase of Bus Connect's Bus Corridors project. Is that agreed? Agreed. Correspondence from the chairperson. It's from a resident association, a resident. The lady's name is Pauline McGuinness, about the airport noise regulation bill. Proposed that we note that. Agreed. Correspondence 2019-381. This is an email from me to the committee regarding correspondence from Mr. Stuart Gilhooly. I propose we note that correspondence. We discussed it earlier and we'll act as we agreed there. Correspondence 2019-392 A, B and C. Email again from me regarding correspondence from Resident Association regarding Bus Connect corridors, and it's proposed that we consider that as part of our work programme. Agreed? Agreed. We're nearly finished. Correspondence item 2019-393A and B. Email from Chris Smith again. He's been very busy. Minister's Office, 22nd of January. This is in relation to Brexit memorandum. It's proposed to note this item and it will be discussed on the 6th of February. Is that agreed? Agreed. Is there any other business before we commence? Sorry, I'll just take, Senator Freakin, then Deputy O'Queen.
When are the FAI coming in? Is it the 6th of February?
20th of February.
20th of February, thank you.
Yeah.
And that's at 1:30, is it?
1:30 in the afternoon. You'll be there that day. Right, sorry, Deputy O'Queen.
Was there correspondence from Deputy Troy?
Was there correspondence from Deputy Troy? I know he's not.
That's for next week. It's down for next week. Only came in today.
Sorry, it came in today.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's all right.
Apologies. Yeah, there is
I'll leave it
correspondence.
to in his capable hands. Deal with it when it comes up. I'll explain that to him.
Okay. Before we commence the main business today, on behalf of the members of the committee, I would like to welcome Senator Mark Daly, who joins us as a new member. You're very welcome, Senator Daly, and we very much look forward to working with you over the remainder of the current thaw. I'd also like to pay tribute to Senator Ned O'Sullivan, who Senator Daly is replacing, and record our appreciation to Senator O'Sullivan for his contribution to the work of the committee. Now, the purpose of today's meeting, is the committee's consideration of the corporate governance framework of the Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport. And in this regard, I would like to welcome our following witnesses, and apologies for the correspondence, not of that, the delay. Mr. Graham Doyle, Secretary General of the Department, Ray O'Leary, Assistant Secretary, Ken Spratt, Assistant Secretary, Miss Anya Stapleton, Assistant Secretary, and Miss Aoife O'Grady, Department of Transport. And sorry, Miss Jane Lawler, also from the Department of Transport. You're all very welcome. Indeed, Secretary General, if I'm not mistaken, this is your first appearance. Certainly, since I became a member of this committee, we're delighted that you've come with your staff. And I just have to read this privileged general notice here. Before we commence, for the purpose of witnesses attending, in accordance with procedures, I am required to read the following. By virtue of Section 17(2)(1) of the Defamation Act 2009, witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in respect of the evidence you are to give to the committee. However, if you are directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter and you continue to do so, you're entitled thereafter only to a qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that, where possible, you should not criticise nor make charges against any person or persons or entity by name or in such a way as to make him, her or it identifiable. Members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that members should not comment on, criticise or make charges against either a person outside the Houses or an official, either by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. I now invite Mr. Graham Doyle, Secretary General, Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport, to make his opening statement, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just before I give the opening statement, thank you for the welcome and for introducing colleagues briefly. I might just say, I might just give a little indication of their roles. So Anya Stapleton is our Assistant Secretary for Corporate Affairs. Aoife O'Grady is our Head of Corporate Support and Communications. Jane Lawler works with Aoife, particularly on the issue of governance coordination. Also today, as you've mentioned, Ray O'Leary and Ken Spratt are members of our management board, and they're with me today on the basis that Ray chairs our risk committee and Ken is the chair of our governance committee, and he's also a member of our internal audit committee as well. So I'd like to thank the committee for giving me the opportunity to speak on the Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport's corporate governance framework. The department has a wide remit with high-level goals in its statement of strategy covering public transport investment and regulation, roads and road safety, aviation, maritime, tourism and sport, with an annual budget in the order of €2.3 billion. Good governance is essential to the effective operation of a department of this complexity and breadth. The arrangements in place help to provide assurance to me, both in my role as Secretary-General and as Accounting Officer, that we're effectively discharging our responsibilities. I'll begin by focusing on the departmental arrangements. While civil service departments have always valued strong governance, a greater focus on formalising our arrangements has its origins in a 2014 initiative on strengthening civil service accountability and performance. That paper recommended a written corporate governance framework as a platform for strengthening the overall management of government departments. This concept was incorporated into the 2014 Civil Service Renewal Plan, which at Action 3 committed to a common civil service governance standard. Our corporate governance arrangements for the department therefore are grounded in the corporate governance standard for the civil service, which was led by the Civil Service Management Board as part of its implementation of the renewal plan. I'll just take you briefly through the highlights of our framework document. Chapter 1 frames our overall activities by setting out a general overview of the department in terms of structures, ethos and strategy. It sets out our mission statement, which is to shape the safe and sustainable development of transport, tourism and sport to support economic growth and social progress. Chapter 2 defines the roles and responsibilities of ministerial and senior management staff, the department's relationship with our Minister and Minister of State, and an overview of senior management governance roles and responsibilities. This chapter also looks at how responsibilities assigned to officers of the department for the performance of its functions under the Public Services Management Act 1997. Chapter 3 sets out the primary management structures within the department to provide a means to develop the department's capacity, including the capability of its leadership team, management and staff. Chapter 4 details the mechanisms through which the department ensures that risk and performance are adequately managed through robust internal control systems and effective performance management practices. Chapter 5 details the relationship the department has had or has with the 24 agencies under its aegis and provides an overview of the approach applied to external governance and oversight. In engaging with stakeholders, the department strives for openness, transparency and accountability, which are delivered through our robust governance structures and the relationship we have in place with our agencies. With a view to continuous improvement of its overall performance, including a desire to strengthen its approach to governance and improve its strategic focus, I recommended that the department participate in the pilot organisational capability review, which we term the OCRs, in 2017 under the Civil Service Renewal Programme. This was a valuable exercise which led to the development of an action plan in January 2018, which we align along 4 pillars. Firstly, investing in our team, communication and integrated working, thirdly, stronger strategic focus, and finally, policy implementation. A key part of ensuring effective delivery of the 4 pillars involved reorganising internal structures to provide for strategic leadership and ownership at both management board and divisional level as implementation commenced. These changes were implemented to strengthen all areas of governance and to demonstrate our commitment through a range of actions. In January 2018, I centralised the corporate functions and policy coordination functions under a new Assistant Secretary post to give a stronger strategic focus to our corporate affairs and policy coordination. This reconfiguring of all the corporate functions within the remit of one Assistant Secretary provides overarching responsibility for the department's governance and our governance structures. This included creating a dedicated governance division which deals not only with the overall department's governance requirements, but also with the oversight of the 24 agencies under the aegis of the department. The centralising of the governance role has provided consistency throughout the department, with a central contact point now to manage governance requirements and oversight of our governance structures in place. I'm confident that these revised arrangements, together with structural changes made earlier last year, will help to bring a clearer focus to the successful delivery of the Department's business objectives. The reconfiguration of the corporate functions is central to this by providing the Department and all our staff with the necessary supports to deliver to the highest standards. In addition to the above, the introduction of new structures has allowed for the consideration and refinement of implementation actions by heads of function through the newly established HOF, or Heads of Function Forum. As part of this structural change, I and my Management Board colleagues gave approval for the establishment of a governance committee to oversee and advise us on the ongoing development of good practice governance framework for the Department, the arrangements to ensure compliance with the Department's corporate obligations, the implementation of the framework for the governance of state agencies under the remit of the Department, and the liaison arrangements with the Risk Committee and the Audit Committee on an ongoing basis. This structure has worked very well, providing additional governance support to the Management Board, and is underpinned by a governance calendar which records all governance requirements across the Department, ensuring corporate obligations and the extent to which they're being met in accordance with an agreed calendar of activities. The Management Board continues to play a central role overseeing the governance structures in place, which includes, but is not limited to, engaging in business planning with each sector to ensure that our high-level goals are being carried into our annual business planning and that good progress is being made on their implementation. Reviewing on an annual basis the Department's corporate governance framework, keeping under review the governance arrangements in place with the commercial state agencies under the aegis of the Department, and also keeping under review the arrangements in place with the non-commercial agencies under the aegis of the Department. Given the broad remit of the Department and the diverse range of functions which are carried out through our 24 agencies, strong corporate governance measures in respect of our agencies are essential building blocks in our overall governance structures and procedures. The approach to the governance of our agencies takes account of the civil service framework and is also grounded in the revised Code of Practice for the Governance of State Bodies published by the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform in 2016. This is the principal framework for best practice governance arrangements applicable to commercial and non-commercial state bodies. It's intended to take account of developments in respect of oversight arrangements with the parent department and internal practices of the state body itself, including reporting requirements and the appointment of board members. In March 2018, we adopted a new framework document for the Department's oversight of both commercial and non-commercial state bodies in respect of governance. The core objective of this document was to establish the means by which the Department as a whole oversees the governance of its state bodies, and how I, as accounting officer, and the wider Management Board can be assured on the compliance by our state agencies with the revised Code of Practice 2016. The framework assists with strong governance in a number of respects. It provides guidance to all the stakeholders with respect to government's current objectives for state bodies and their subsidiaries, and enables us to maintain a consistent and structured approach to governance. It clearly defines the Department's relationship with the state bodies and the mechanisms to monitor output, outcomes and performance. The document also outlines roles and responsibilities of all stakeholders in keeping with the governing legislation of the state bodies involved. To ensure consistency and quality in terms of outputs, the Department has provided templates for shareholder expectation letters, performance delivery agreements, oversight agreements, and a compliance checklist to be filled out by the state body and returned with the chairperson's comprehensive report each year. Implementation of these arrangements is reported to the Management Board with follow-up actions taken on any outstanding issues. I've also put in new arrangements in place to give the Management Board a stronger role in assessing requests from our non-commercial agencies for additional staffing to ensure that a stronger whole-of-sector approach is taken to such issues. Good governance is, of course, not just a theoretical framework, but it's intended to lead to better outcomes for the Department and its agencies. The corporate governance arrangements in place today play an important role in helping us to achieve our goals and objectives. Thank you, Chairman.
General, I propose to proceed as we normally do with our meetings, that will take the Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Sinn Féin and then independent members. So I take or the parties, Senator Feehan.
Thank you, Chair, and you're very, very welcome here today. And I suppose corporate governance is something that we've only embraced in the last number of years. And I was delighted, like in 2014, you said that the Civil Service Renewal Plan, that it did try to bring corporate governance into all areas, and I think it shows a professionalism within the Department, and I welcome this today. Just, you know, I suppose corporate governance is rules and practices and processes, and I suppose it's a balancing act between the many stakeholders of which you have shareholders effectively who are the government. You have the management team, which effectively yourselves, and the customers or the community. And I very much welcome the fact that this is happening, and I'm delighted that we're 5 years into this, and it shows that I suspect there's a strong private sector influence now, and I've noticed in a lot of the departments that a lot of good knowledge, and so it's nice to see the balance of people coming from the private sector. And I know in our own committees and the Good Friday Committee and indeed British Irish, you have a lot of people who have come in from the banking sector, from other, and they bring a valued approach along with the valued work that has been done as well. So I think it's the way forward. Just a dedicated governance division which deals with not only the overall department's governance requirements but also the oversight of 24 agencies. It's a huge amount of agencies you have, and I'd just like to know, how did we come to this? Did we look for outside help from other agencies, or did you look across the world from various countries, how they manage it? Because I know our membership of the EU has been very important, and I know probably in Germany and other countries that they have different approaches. Is there any other approaches through maybe the political system around the world? I'm just thinking about smaller countries like maybe New Zealand or countries similar to us that you've looked at. Are there any other views? Just finally, I suppose you rightly said it clearly defines the department's relationship with state bodies and a mechanism to monitor outcomes and performances. That's very, very welcome, because I think that everybody should be held to account, and I very much welcome that. And finally, I wish you well in the future. As I said, we're 24 agencies, and I think there's a lot happening over the years, and I certainly feel that I'm one that came from the private sector. I believe that if we have money and the state is generating lots of money, it needs to be spent, I suppose, prudently, and I wish you every success, so thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Deputy Imelda Munster, Senator Mark Daly.
A couple of questions.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, yeah. Just in relation to, I'm just wondering if you can comment on how the department's work plan has been affected, given the lack of substantial increase, or little increase really, in funding that was secured by the Minister, just how your overall work plan has been impacted by that. The capital funding, I think, is minus 30 million this year, so just if you could maybe brief on that. But the other thing I wanted to, and I don't know if you can comment on the freedom of information section of your department, but I had a number of difficulties in obtaining information from the department under FOI, and on one occasion it turned out that it was an important document that was filed under the wrong year, if you like. So it took, there was difficulties and delays in locating it. And just on another FOI that I had put in, now I had felt the basis for the FOI was quite narrow, and it wasn't overly onerous, if you like, but there was a cost attached of 300 €. So I'm just wondering on what basis, if you are in a position to comment, on what basis would you apply costs as such? You know, particularly this one in particular really was quite narrow. I couldn't believe it when I came back. So just your the position that you take on that, and just in relation to data regarding FOIs, how long did they take? You know, the charges attached, and also if you've had any complaints about FOIs from the department.
Thank you, Senator Daly, and then we'll go back to the department officials.
Thanks, thanks, Secretary General, for coming in. And I, from your presentation, I'm wondering, would you be available for the Department of Health, because your governance seems to be slightly more robust than in some other departments.
Question, Senator.
Anyway, I actually was previously and served on the Good Friday Agreement Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee, so it's kind of also going to be directives to the Minister when he does come in relation to the issue of the border and preparation in terms of Brexit. And like, is there anything, I was looking at the risk register.
What we've agreed is that the Minister will deal with all of the issues in relation to Brexit.
Oh yeah, well then,
and we have a special meeting on it.
Well, this is a governance issue, and so
yeah, certainly governance is a different issue, no problem.
But like, no, it's in relation to governance because of the risk register and the fact that I couldn't find, and maybe Mr. O'Leary would answer this question, these questions in terms of the issue of the risk register and how the risk committee has, in terms of governance, has been looking at that issue because, whatever about the political issue of, we don't want to talk about it, and there are valid reasons why that may not be discussed from a political point of view. From a risk register, from proper governance and oversight, the risk committee's job is to say, well, regardless of the political outcome or the political issues, we have an obligation to look at the issue of the impact on the department and all 24 agencies, and in that regard, the other thing that I didn't see on the risk register, and I just wanted to get Mr. O'Leary's comments on this, is the issue of the governance and the risk committee on the issue of United Ireland, and I know this because being on the Good Friday Agreement Committee, is that it's not on the risk register. I don't see it as a risk, but like, it has a huge impact on any department, all of the departments. If there was a border poll, which is being talked about, even Sean O'Rourke's programme and all the rest, it's not on the risk register. And the first question, I suppose, is, well, why is it not on the risk register? Was it discussed at the risk committee? And if not, why not?
Okay, just on that point, and I want to be fair to everybody, and I appreciate, as a member, you're absolutely entitled to ask your questions. And I just want to be, there's no issue with raising questions on the risk register at all whatsoever. And it's not so much that there's no stop on any question at all, except that Brexit-related issues, and all of them, I'm trying to keep for the meeting later on. So, but
I don't disagree with the chair.
Yeah, no. I just want to get this right. I want to make sure that your risk register questions are answered. But at the same time, I'm very conscious that the department is under the direction of the Minister, who isn't here, on some of these issues, and we will have a special meeting on that. And if that's fair to you and to them, that's what I want.
I don't want to just
want to get it right.
Yeah, for issue of clarification, and maybe this is certainly a government issue. I presume the Minister would have no input into whether or not something is on the risk register if the risk committee believes it's a risk.
No, I would imagine you would.
I just wanted to clarify that. I just, Chair, and for the benefit of the committee, this is an issue of governance. It's not. It's an issue of Brexit because. And we've seen this with the banking crisis, and we all lived through that, is the problem of not addressing an issue, this idea that policy neglect seldom goes unpunished, which I came across in the report I did with Senator Feehan and the Good Friday Agreement Committee were involved in, is that the lack of proper planning has huge consequences. And, the issue of that border poll is being talked about not by us but by unionists. And if it's not on the risk register, why not? Has it been discussed at the committee? And if it hasn't, why hasn't it been discussed at the committee? Because to be fair to the Minister, when he comes in, he might actually say, I'll talk to the risk committee to give you the answer. But the
I think the department will answer as best they can, given the constraints that you are under, and I want to make that very clear. But anything with the risk register is fine.
Oh, absolutely.
Sorry, excuse me.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Perhaps I'll just deal with those in turn then. Thank you, Senator Feehan, for your comments. I think, yes, it is very much, as we look at the rules and practices around governance, it is very much a balancing act across all stakeholders, agencies themselves, most importantly, whoever the ultimate client is, which is the citizen, the taxpayer, the person living in the country. So balancing those is a critical part as we look at how what we do at a departmental level influences what our agencies do. And I think you're right. There is a far greater private sector influence in the public sector as we look across the renewal programme, for example, in the civil service. I know you were talking about people from the private sector coming into government. and you qualified it quickly by, of course, acknowledging the work of civil servants. I actually came from the private sector. I'm a chartered accountant by profession. I came into the department at assistant secretary level about 5 years ago, and then took over the Sec General. So we see some of those influences happening, and I suppose it's interesting to come from outside the system into it as somebody who had a long career in the private sector, and to see how thinking is changing regularly. And I was actually I worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers for a long time, and I was on secondment to the department, a forerunner of this department back in 2004, 2005. So it was very interesting to come back and see the changes that took place over that period of time. You asked for other external influences around how we deal with the issue of governance and managing agencies and all of that. One significant change that we've made in the last 12 months is that we've come to under a memorandum of understanding or a terms of reference with New Era. So we asked them if, as part of our work in the governance space, if they would form a stronger relationship with us, and that's been very beneficial in terms of them bringing particularly their financial expertise to bear. They have a seconded member in the department who is now available to the divisions of the department to deal with routine issues in the first instance, and then there's much wider expertise back at New Era HQ for that individual as well. And we've also very voluntarily, as opposed to it being mandated under legislation, which I think it is in other cases, to have commentary from New Era on some of our largest agencies as part of their annual report as well. And as I say, that was something that we felt it would be useful to sign up to, even though it wasn't actually mandated, but it's just part again of our overall focus. You asked for international influence. I think the main principles for the written governance framework were developed by the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, and I think a number of departments around the system were part of a group looking at how that would be brought about. And then internationally, from memory, and I may be wrong on this, but I believe there was some comparison with New Zealand, with Singapore, with the UK, and certain other countries. It's actually a lot of the principles actually come from the OECD governance principles for the public sector. So I think that was one area that was drawn upon. And let me just check. I think you talked about just the focus on outcomes, and again, that is something that we've tried to bring about as an ethos within the department. It's part of our. We have 2 yearly sessions now with each division of the department under each assistant secretary. But all management board members take part in those, just to try and bring an overall focus, and because we've got such a broad remit, I suppose, learnings and questioning from other parts of the department to try and balance out if someone is in a particular area, trying to see the wood from the trees and all of that. We have also, since the organisation capability review, we are now engaging in a lot of cross-departmental work, particularly around policy forums and sessions where particular policy matters can be teased out. So I think that covers those issues. Deputy Munster, just in relation to our work plan for this year, I suppose you referenced the budget and the extent of the extent of additional funding under that. It has been difficult for departments in recent years to try and find additional current funding, and that has been a challenge for our department. We have been very successful in arguing for much more significant levels of capital funding, and I think we're one of the biggest beneficiaries of funding under the National Development Plan. So I think in terms of the work programme that you mentioned, it is very much about rolling out that National Development Plan over the next number of years through our agencies and working with them and ensuring that the department has an overall sight and can engage in some, particularly in guidance and risk management around the rollout of that plan. I think the work that we have done, I suppose, when I took over the Secretary General position, we had reached a low point, I think, in terms of numbers of staff available to us in certain areas post-recession. We had lost a lot of very, very experienced staff, and it was a question in terms of being able to be faithful to our work programme and roll that out. We very much had to engage in a rebuilding exercise. So I think the resources that have been provided do allow us to do that, and we have had the scope to do that. Just in relation to the FOI issues, I would just say, first of all, I'm very sorry to hear if there's a particular difficulty in a particular case or two cases. Indeed, so apologies for that if that has come about. I don't know the specifics, but we'll be happy to talk to you perhaps separately in relation to that if we can be helpful. I think in terms of freedom of information, the level of freedom of information requests have risen really significantly in recent years. So if I look back at, I think 2014 was something like just under 100 freedom of information requests. In 2018, it was closer to 350 freedom of information requests. So that is growing very, very substantially as part of the work within the department. We do try our very best to deal with freedom of information requests, and as I say, I'm sorry if you've had a particularly difficult experience. In terms of if it was to reach obviously the level of seriousness, there is the potential for complaints to go to the Information Commissioner, but I don't think we've had an instance. An instance of that or any serious issues arising around it. What else do we have there? Just anything you'd like to say on freedom of information just before I finish it?
I think perhaps it might just be useful to add, Deputy, we appreciate that there are, I suppose, ongoing challenges with record management, and again, we regret if some of the records you had sought perhaps had been misplaced. It is our intention in 2019 to put more of a focus on that, and we hope to bring into our team an archivist who will give us some specialist guidance in terms of how best to do that. I think we're probably not alone in the department in finding it a challenge to cope, particularly with the large volumes of electronic records, and we want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that firstly is aligned well with our statutory obligations under FOI, under GDPR, and under other statutory obligations, but also with a forward look to make sure that what we do now meets the necessary obligations under the Archives Act in the future. So we do recognise we're on a pathway to improving our records management.
Chairman, just I know you've just cautioned in relation to Brexit overall and some elements of it. Just to try at a general level to answer Senator Daly's questions. I suppose Brexit has been our number one risk and has been identified as such. It has been dealt with across the department with, again, that very broad remit that I referred to. As part of our restructuring, we took a unit that had a very broad range of European affairs issues generally that it dealt with, and we refocused that particular unit under a very, very experienced principal officer who reports to Anya. We use that unit in terms of trying to manage the risks around Brexit, and this would go back actually before the vote, in fact, at the early stages of this. We use that unit and resource that unit as one to coordinate the department's work, because there are very few aspects of the department that Brexit doesn't touch in one shape or form. So there are various structures. There are structures that I feed into at Secretary-General level. There's various structures that Anya feeds into. The individual assistant secretaries, so we have 6 assistant secretaries in total on our management board who head up particular sectoral areas. They themselves have very, very broad remits, so there are structures that they feed into. And then the heads of divisions feed into a variety of structures as well. Within the department, we have overall Brexit coordination. And as I say, whether you go down or up in terms of the structures, there is a huge, huge amount of work involved in Brexit. I often say, and I think I said it to the chairman just as we were chatting briefly outside, there is just a huge amount of work going on, as everyone is obviously aware, across government departments here in the UK and in Europe generally. I think that the time, whenever we get to the end of all of this, I think the time that has been spent and the focus that has been put into this, it has an opportunity cost, there's no doubt about it, but we are trying to avoid the key risks. In relation to our own department, I suppose the most significant issues that we have had have been the rights of aircraft to fly between Britain and the UK, the rights of Irish hauliers to access the UK itself and also the EU by transiting the UK, the impacts on the Irish tourism industry of negative factors in the UK, which is one of our key markets, and particularly the weakness of sterling. We've also tried to contribute strongly to whole of government matters, in particular the requirements of the Departments of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, the Department of Health and the Revenue Commissioners to carry out checks that they may need to carry out at ports and airports once the UK becomes a third country, and also working with colleagues in, for example, the Department of Foreign Affairs to try and positively influence the application of checks at the UK and mainland European ports, particularly French ports, that Irish hauliers transit through. As well as considering alternatives, I think, in terms of the routes to European markets. So there are a whole range of other issues that the department has been addressing, and a lot of them of some importance. Those ones being I suppose the most challenging ones that we've dealt with. We've had very substantial progress on aviation issues, including in a potential no-deal scenario, to try to ensure that connectivity for airlines owned and controlled in the EU continues, and there is the Commission, with influence from Ireland and other interested member states, has a contingency in place that will ensure that aircraft fly. It is a temporary arrangement if reciprocated by the UK, but for something that could have been a massive negative, to say the very least. There's been very substantial progress on that. Equally, there's been very substantial progress on the issue of the licensing matters and the rights of hauliers to enter and leave the country under arrangements, again, that if reciprocated by the UK, will allow vehicles required market access for the immediate period following a potential no deal. And while, again, that is a temporary arrangement with the European Commission, I think it's a 9-month arrangement, Up to a week before Christmas, the scenario was a fallback position, which ECMT licensing, which I won't bore you with the detail of, but it would have actually meant that 7% of trucks needing to access the UK or through the UK could be licensed. So a tremendously difficult issue to deal with and to try to plan for. So again, these were some of our main issues. I don't want to make my answer too long by going into more, but they were probably the top two, and just identified as the number one risk across the department, and what we've Brexit overall, and what we've applied a huge amount of focus to. The issues in relation to borders, and there are lots of people out in the media commenting in various ways on borders and issues like that. They're not issues for this department, and I just think it would be damaging for me or for my colleagues to comment on them. So I don't want to do that. If that's okay.
I think it's not about for this committee as such.
Sure.
I think you've been very helpful in your answers there at the same time. Sorry, Deputy Munster wants to. I may have to ask a few
just
questions.
a brief question. You had said that the department has identified Brexit as your number one risk. I'm just wondering what additional funding has the department been allocated in light of Brexit?
Yeah, I suppose many of the issues are not issues of funding, except for particularly the tourism one. Perhaps I could ask Ken maybe to comment, because in light of that, we have applied quite a significant level of additional resources to tourism, particularly in the context of Brexit.
Sure. So, Deputy, for next year, our budget is going to increase by around 35 million. About 19.5 million of that will be in capital funding, and about 15.5 million of that will be in current funding. The 15.5 for current funding will be aimed at marketing overseas in order to try and defend what we have in GB, but also to try and increase the incoming tourists from mainland Europe and from North America and from overseas markets as well. Some of that additional current will also be aimed at businesses in Ireland in order to ensure that they're actually Brexit ready and are in a position to be able to divert their incoming tourists into their businesses from GB and towards mainland Europe.
That's from next year, though, as opposed to this year, is it?
Sorry, for 2019. For this year. And then we also have a very significant increase of around 19.5 million in capital, which is aimed at product development and also greenways development. So all in all, about 35 million.
Yeah, that's
additional.
Basic. Okay.
So one of our officials, I think you may have wanted to reply to some of the questions of Deputy Daly. Sorry, Senator Daly. Sorry,
I think the Secretary covered. I suppose just to confirm the point that the Minister does not have an input into the risk register nor into the work of the risk committee.
Just on the specific questions in relation to, like, United Ireland, have you looked at it, and if not, why is it? It's not on the risk register.
In fairness, I'm trying to just stay away from anything that isn't germane to today. There's lots of other times to ask that particular question. It's a very important question. Yeah, but I think I just want to stick to the Department of Transport issues.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Today. It's a governance issue.
Yeah, like just let me get it right, Senator. I want to be as helpful as possible to everybody, particularly yourself. And I appreciate this is our first time in this meeting together. And I just ask you, if you can, just refer to the issues which are germane to today.
Yeah, but can I just? We're talking about governance.
We are.
One of the issues in one of the issues of governance is the Audit Risk Committee performance practice. Chapter 4, the Department ensures that risk and performance are adequately managed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Okay.
Yeah,
so I'm asking
about
an issue that is in the public sphere that people are talking about that has huge potential risk if not properly managed. I couldn't be in front of a more appropriate group of people to ask this question about the Audit Risk Committee, which is here, the Risk Committee, and ask an issue which is in the public sphere, which unions, Theresa, everyone from the British Prime Minister Arlene,
In
sorry,
fairness, you can make your political speeches somewhere else.
there's another
I'm
political...
sorry, I'm ruling. Look, come here.
Sorry.
I want to be very clear. Your questions are proper and germane to the audit. I have questions on the audit myself. And without, just if you're asking about the audit, you get your answers.
Yeah,
right?
but that's my...
But the British Prime Minister is not part of it.
No, but I'm just saying, the
is,
reason I'm asking it here,
I know
because
why
we're
you're
talking
asking
about
it,
governance, is the person in charge of the risk committee is here at the meeting.
Sure, of
We're
course.
talking about governance. I'm asking about a governance issue.
No
which
issue
is-
with governance
Which
issue,
is to do with an issue that has huge potential risk if not properly managed.
Sure, okay.
Right? And that issue of policy neglect seldom goes unpunished. The three questions I have is, A, it's not, confirm it's not on the risk register. B, was it ever discussed by the risk committee? And C, if not, why not?
Senator,
Sorry, I actually...
Sorry, just hold on.
Secretary General, whether yourself or Ray answers, I don't mind, but like it's a specific question.
I think in
on
fairness,
risk.
I'm the chairman here. I'm happy. Look,
I'm happy for either
I'm
plan.
trying to be helpful. I genuinely am. And I think the department have been very helpful too. So we're not trying to walk anybody into an area that isn't our area today. But at the same time, as regards risk committees, generic. It's a generic question, I think, is it? Or
Yeah.
do you wish to say something on it?
Senator, I mean, risk issues dealt with by the risk committee, yes. I'm not sure I'm following your line on this. I think, look, we deal with transport issues, political issues dealt with by the Department of Foreign Affairs, and you know, it's just not something that I think we're in a position to or competent to comment on at a committee hearing like this. So, Chairman, I thank you for your comments.
Yeah, no. I'm happy.
Can I? Yeah, I know, but
I'm sorry, I've ruled on that.
No,
Senator,
no,
Senator, I
Chairman.
want to be very clear. Any question to deal with technical matters are fine, but only issues which are germane to the Department of Transport. There are other fora where you're a member of, or you have the right to go into to raise other points. I have some questions, if I may, on just these are generic questions. I'm just trying to follow through an issue here, if I may, but I'm conscious.
Can I just come in again,
Yeah,
Chair?
but-
It's
yeah,
the-
you can, of
I-
course.
and I agree with you, it is preliminary the Department of Foreign Affairs. But the issue that I'm talking about in relation to United Ireland would affect the Department of Health, Department of Education, Department of Housing, every agriculture, because it's agriculture, it's crossed the entire remit of government. It couldn't be more broad-ranging in its impact in terms of tourism, in terms of transport.
made his point, and I think
but like,
we should leave it at that. I just want to ask some questions. If I may,
Sorry,
please.
just Chair, to be helpful in this,
Yeah.
literally, this is my first meeting, so I apologise for
course,
this.
yeah.
But like, in relation to governance and the risk committee,
Yeah.
all I'm asking are three questions. It's not on the register. If it's not on the register, was it
You're not
discussed?
a
And if not,
political issue. It's
why
not
not?
a- it's
They're
not
not,
a-
it's not a political, it is a political issue.
It is a political
But it goes
issue.
back to, Chairman, it
Come
goes
here,
back to my original point. The minister or politicians are not allowed to interfere with the department when it comes to issues that they feel are too sensitive. The department's role, the public service role, the permanent government, and sometimes thankfully, role is to highlight issues that are uncomfortable for politicians to address for political reasons, and we all know those ones. But my concern here is that, and because I've done the research and had spoken to people in Northern Ireland, there is a concern, and particularly in unionism, so take that concern, that there will be a referendum within 5 years. If I told you that within 5 years you had to prepare for that...
I'm asking the witnesses not to reply on the grounds that it's not germane to this meeting. I would point out to committee, I would point out to the Senator, you have every opportunity in the Senate, you have every opportunity in Foreign Affairs to raise those issues at, and I'm ruling that your question is out of order, but I want to... Hold on now, hold on. I just want to ask just a few generic questions, if I may. I'm trying to follow a trend here in my own thought in relation to the accountability, financial, and today, obviously, the question of the hospital is very much in people's minds. Now, under your department, or accounting, or responsible in different ways to your department are semi-state bodies and state bodies which spend an awful lot of public funding. And obviously the question of auditing through the PAC, the question of reports then to your financial officer and New Era are important issues which you deal with. The question I have is actually the role of your internal audit. What does your internal audit actually do? in the context, if anything, with those other organisations. And I'm thinking particularly of some issues that I've raised separately with another state body. In other words, where internal audit reports of that body have raised matters of significance, which you might call red flag issues, but the report to the Public Accounts Committee doesn't refer to those, and there's no issue when it gets to that level. In other words, what intervention, if any, does the Internal Audit Committee make in state bodies where issues might arise?
Certainly.
That's a fair question to you.
Certainly, Chair. In terms of the focus of the Internal Audit Unit is to provide assurance to me as accounting officer in terms of how we spend our funds, that ultimately audited, of course, by the Controller and Auditor General, and ultimately where I answer questions on elements of that at PAC. In terms of the overall programme spend that the department makes, in many cases allocation of funding into particular spending agencies, that is where we don't give money to our commercial areas, we don't grant money to our commercial agencies. So there's a mixture across the 24 of commercial entities, be it Dublin Airport Authority or whoever. And even when it comes to somebody receiving a public service obligation payment like CIE, for example, they do that under service level agreements with the National Transport Authority and under essentially a contract with the National Transport Authority rather than receiving the monies directly through us. So our Internal Audit Unit will give me as accounting officer and the management board more widely a level of assurance in terms of our overall management of those monies. We'll also audit our corporate governance arrangements, actually, which is what the statement is about, and how we interact with those agencies. And there's an external review of that that happens periodically as well. And where recommendations have been made, they have all been taken on board. The Internal Audit Unit does not go out and audit the National Transport Authority, the non-commercial agencies, for example, or any of the other ones. They are all subject to separate audit procedures.
The asked question is just that it just says there in your commentary that it reviews the governance of the agencies. So
yes.
In other words, it will review their governance.
Yeah.
But by doing that, it must physically look at what evidence would they look at?
Well, they will review our
policies. Is it?
Yes, so they will make sure that the divisions within our department who are charged with the governance of those particular agencies are operating in accordance with our standards, our governance standards. Yeah. So rather than audit the agencies, we will monitor the compliance of those agencies with the governance code, etc., etc. Making sure that they have done all of the things that they need to do to be in compliance, and then those divisions monitoring those non-commercial agencies, and indeed the commercial ones as well, their overall approach to governance and compliance with our standards and our procedures will be audited, and I think is audited quite often, in fact, by our Internal Audit Unit.
And those audits, and I'm including here New Era audits, or examinations of account, are they actually published? Do you publish those, or are they available?
They are available.
Like the summary or whatever.
Yeah, they're available to the Controller and Auditor General as part of that work.
Commercial companies, and if they're not.
Well, in the sense of we wouldn't audit the commercial companies, but any of our reports, any of our internal audit reports, such that they help the Controller and Auditor General with their wider audit, they are available to the Controller and Auditor General.
Are they available to the public?
Are they available to the public?
Or are they on your? Or what do you publish them, or should you publish them on your website?
Do we publish them?
I don't know if you do or not. No,
I'll have to check it for you, Chair. We certainly have them available on our own internal web, but we would have no problem making them available.
No, I know that. And I think what's hugely important is because obviously in the National 2040 Development Plan, there's going to be billions of public funding spent.
Yes,
and obviously, while you're not the spending department, but you do have some oversight over that you would publish whatever documentation would be appropriate. I think it's important that, in the light of Deputy Munster's point, I think that you can't put enough information out there.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of transparency.
My instinct is to say that we do publish them publicly, but I may be wrong about that. But I know they're certainly available to anybody within our department. Ray, do you know the answer to that?
I suppose, as ever, and I'm thinking of this from a couple of angles, because I, as well as chairing the Risk Committee, I have have an administrative relationship with our independent accident investigation units. And as the chair of the Risk Committee, I also interact with the Audit Committee and our Internal Audit Unit. I suppose that there is a balance always between kind of publication and what you do with that information, and the importance of being able to investigate and look at what happened. So I suppose that's always the balance, whether whether it's an accident investigator, an internal auditor, in any case where something goes wrong, the ability to go in a non-inquisitorial fashion to follow the trail of facts is integral to avoid doing it in future. And it's a real tension always between there's a balance between who did something wrong and what we do about that, versus what went wrong and how do we stop it happening again.
I think that's the latter question.
There's a tension there always. And of course the other issue, I suppose, that we also have to be sensitive of is issues of commercial confidentiality.
Of course,
depending on either the body or its external relationships. So it's something we have to be conscious of as well. So I think that's always the balance around these. As I understand it, the comprehensive internal audit reports are not published. The findings and in particular the recommendations would, for example, be circulated to the management board. The comprehensive content wouldn't necessarily be.
That goes to the heart of my query. My query is, if there is an internal audit of a body which is under the aegis of your department, that those audits are not, the complete audits are not available. In other words, I'm actually at the moment, and it's nothing to do with your good selves, I'm with the Information Commission on this very point. It's the question as to whether internal audits, which have found matters of significance in that they're red flagged, are that we don't know what actually went wrong. We do know the outcomes, as you say, that A, B, C, and D were found, but we don't know what actually went wrong. And that's my concern in the context of the future. In other words, with the 2040 plan, what are the issues? There will certainly be issues will arise, and there will be internal audits within those organisations which will clearly identify issues, but the transparency of knowing about them is at this moment not available to the likes of the public. And it's just trying to get
no, it's a fair point. I think I mentioned that all of our internal audit work is made available to the Controller and Auditor General. So through the CNAG report, which is published, ultimately, if an issue was of such significance as to merit, now I'm going to touch lots of wood here that we haven't had issues like that.
The question I have with that is that how do we know if it gets to the CNAG? Because if the report to the PAC doesn't mention it, how do we know that they actually saw it? That's my. But I mean, that's not.
I suppose look. I think it's a case of. My understanding of how this works is that the results and all of the audits are literally handed over, and
the internal audits are.
Yeah, they're just handed over to the CNAG and has full access to them. I should just mention, just as a matter of interest, in terms of how we organise our internal audit function, we actually. We source it in a particular way. So we have two people who operate, very experienced gentleman and who is fully qualified under the body that certifies internal auditors, works in terms of planning the audit programme, has a colleague now assisting him he works with an external firm who then carries out the work. Now, it's still internal audit. It's effectively sourced from outside with experts. Our contractor changed recently. It's now Ernst & Young, and so the internal audit and the reporting on internal audit is carried out through the gentleman who heads up the function, but it is delivered externally, and then all reports come to our audit committee, which has both senior managers from within the department. Ken is one of them. At assistant secretary level, there's also a principal officer, and then there are external parties and an external chair. Is the way it works.
Well, I've no doubt that we're both. Everybody's aware of the importance of what you're doing, and the significance and the depth of the analysis, while allowing the freedom of the assembly state or the state body to do its obvious commercial work or whatever. At the same time, they have to be accountable.
Yes, of course.
And we cannot have, anything other than that accountability, and that would be everybody's wish, particularly yours as well. So I think we more or less finished, unless
Sorry, and I know this is a program, but my colleague, Deputy James Brown, had brought up this issue of Rosslare Harbour, which seems to be stuck in a kind of a transjurisdictional quagmire between ourselves and the company in England, which also has part ownership of it. Is there any long-term plan to make sure that that is in the entire control of your department and the agencies under your control? And just, forgive me in relation to the previous question, because everything is consumed by Brexit. We all know that. Everyone's consumed. All I'm looking at is one of the consequences, I know this from talking to the Department of Defence, is that they've looked at is the issue I was talking about, and it's quite understandable why it hasn't been looked at, and and why it's not on the risk register is because we're all consumed by Brexit. But it's just something that, from looking at it from the Good Friday Agreement Committee, which Deputy O'Dowd is on as well, it's a concern that is present. It's beyond the hill, but it's over the horizon, and it's something that's going to affect every department. When I ask people this question in the North, even Eunice, and they say, senior politicians, they say, do you think there'll never be a referendum? And they go,
I think, in fairness, the referendum is a political matter for everybody's different or
it's the impact, Chair.
I think it's, in fairness, I don't know if the officials wish to answer that, but I don't think...
You've ruled already, Chair. I think you've ruled already, Chair, so I'm
ruled already,
I'm very happy to take
then I will now adjourn the meeting.
I think the ruling stands.
Yes.
The meeting is
in
now
relation
adjourned.
to Rosslare, though, but very
thanks.
Very happy to answer in relation to that. Okay, well, look, as you know, and you've referenced your colleague, Senator, Rosslare Port, it's owned by Iarnród Éireann, and it's operated and managed as a division of that company, which is a commercial state body. Just in very recent times, Iarnród Éireann has completed a detailed report on the development potential of Rosslare, and it has its own €15 million plan to transform the port, and that has been approved by the board. And we met with Iarnród Éireann and the management of the port across our department, all elements of the department that can interact with the port, from taking roads to the port to the maritime issues, to Brexit issues just before Christmas, because separately there is going to be a significant amount of investment in state facilities that will be there at the port, and I think it will show a significant commitment by government as well. I can't give you a figure in relation to that, but I'll come on to the issue in a second. So investment in the port itself and its own facilities it's a matter for the company, and the company is now looking at raising that capital and making that planned investment. In the context of Brexit, additional customs checks, agriculture sanitary and photosanitary checks and health controls will be required when the UK leaves the EU, and certainly in Rosslare it is one of the key locations where that impact is felt. So the others being Dublin Port and Dublin Airport mainly, just in terms of particularly the handling of row traffic, roll-on, roll-off traffic. There are plans underway under, as you know, government has, as opposed to looking at a myriad of possible Brexit outcomes and trying to look at planning underneath all of those, government has been planning under a central case scenario, which doesn't look a million miles from what was voted on in Westminster, and also obviously the no deal scenario. Whether we're talking temporarily or in terms of permanent facilities required at Rosslare, that is being coordinated across government in terms of the various departments, the client departments being Agriculture, Department of Health and the Revenue Commissioners. Facilities are being planned and now acted upon in terms of bringing them to bear by the Office of Public Works. This department is very much playing its role in that, in terms of ensuring that the affected ports, Rosslare being one of the main three, and airports, are cooperating in full, identifying locations, providing land where they have it, or helping source land where it's owned by others. So, just to quickly mention, I think under the central case, for example, the facilities for the end of a transition period, looking to put in place significant parking facilities for trucks in Rosslare, inspection bays to carry out control checks, a dedicated border control post for live animals, and accommodation space for customs, agriculture and health officials. So aside from the port's own investment, and I expect the state's investment will, and this is just an expectation, I expect the state investment will be higher in the facilities that are required, and that's a vote of confidence in Rosslare Port and the importance of the port.
Just in the ownership issue.
The ownership issue.
The ownership issue. Getting that resolved?
Yeah, look, it's an ancient issue and one that will, in time, if we were to seek to untangle it, be a very complex one to untangle. I don't believe. I know it's said regularly, but I'm not sure the ownership issue is what is holding back any of these matters. The port is important; it's being invested in, and I don't think the ownership issue is necessarily holding that back. There were other plans looked at, and there were other possibilities looked at for the future of Rosslare Port. Various models for how it could be operated, third-party operation, various other things, franchising. There were a range of options. For some of them, depending on the feasibility now of some of them, for some of them, yeah, the issue of ownership may well have been a complicating factor. But I think, look, in terms of the immediate future of the port and its importance, and as I say, government very much giving a vote of confidence in the port and its importance, I don't think the ownership issue is necessarily holding it back in the short term.
Just on that point, Senator, and it would be helpful, your question is very helpful there, is that we are arranging a visit to Cork soon as a committee. And if you would propose, I think we'd be happy that the committee would actually.
We maybe have to, well, I suppose we'll ask all members
and raise those issues.
We'll go to Kerry as well.
Yeah.
If if Eamon De Valera had done his work right, maybe we would have got Bearhaven, Cove, and Loxwilly, and then Rosslare as well. It was an oversight on that issue, but anyway,
I would like to thank the Secretary General and his officials for attending here today and for a comprehensive presentation. The committee looks forward to engaging with you again soon. And the meeting is now adjourned till 10 a.m. to Joint Committee on the 30th of January. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay. Thank you very much.